Welcome to One Mind Zen. Tonight's Dharma talk is given by Maitri.
Okay, so the Buddha gives a PowerPoint, and this was adapted from my 10-minute Dharma talks. Basically, I'm going to go through the first 6 chapters because that's the where the meat of the Dharma shows up, and I'm going to try to do this 6 chapters in 15 minutes or less. So we'll go through these a little quickly. It's all on here. If you're watching this on YouTube later, you can just press pause and see the whole screen. But then I'll take a little bit more time on the last 2 slides because that's where we wrap it all up. So the life of the Buddha. The Buddha's life is our life. And that's what I want you to try to understand from this. It's not just about history. It's about his awakening that mirrors our own journey. So, what did he face that helped him decide to become an ascetic? He saw those 4 sights of old age, sickness, death, and a wandering ascetic. And those shattered his illusions and called him to look for the truth. And so he had his great renunciation, and he left the palace and became a wandering ascetic. And through his 6 years or so of doing this, he finally discovered the middle way. Neither indulgence nor self-mortification, but balanced, sustained inquiry. And it was beneath the Bodhi tree he awakened. He didn't become enlightened. Buddha means the awakened one. And he awakened not to the supernatural, but to the natural, the nature of things as they truly are. And for 45 years, he taught this. He taught the 4 Noble Truths, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And he established a Sangha that was open to everybody from all statuses of society, men and women. And as he was about to die, and at his parinirvana, his final teaching was impermanence. All conditioned things decay. And just as Unsan every week gives us that great admonition at the end, that was the Buddha's great admonition too. Work out your liberation with diligence. And so his story truly is our story. And so we just have to ask ourselves, where are we on his map? Are we still in the palace? Are we at the forest's edge? Or are we sitting beneath our own Bodhi tree? And then, so the Buddha's greatest teachings were his 4 Noble Truths. This was the basis for all of his discovery of what the reality of nature was. And he followed these 4 Noble Truths. He described them just as a medical doctor would in a medical diagnosis. There was the diagnosis, the cause of the disease, the prognosis, and the treatment. So his first noble truth was suffering. Life involves suffering. This was not some pessimistic idea. This was just him observing the nature of our human existence. There's ordinary suffering, there's suffering of change, and this pervasive unsatisfactoriness of the conditioned existence. Just something's not right. And his second noble truth was craving. Craving for sensory pleasure, craving to become something, and craving for non-existence. This wish to escape from experience, annihilate experience, avoid all suffering, right? And the third noble truth was cessation. Cessation is possible. This was his prognosis. This was, as I said before, he gave the diagnosis. The diagnosis was suffering. The cause was craving. The prognosis is, it's possible. You can cease this suffering. We can extinguish the fire of craving. And then he tells us, what's the treatment? The Noble Eightfold Path. That was the treatment. And living this integrated way of life leads to liberation, this liberation from suffering. So in Zazen, we learn this while we're sitting on the cushion. We witness suffering, craving, cessation directly every time we sit, if we recognize it, if we wake up to it, not as a philosophy, but as a lived experience. And then we take that recognition from the cushion into our daily lives. And so he taught the Noble Eightfold Path, which was the final part, right, of his teaching there of the four noble truths. And so the Eightfold Path is not a linear ladder, but it's a mandala. We often see it in Buddhism as, that eight-spoked wheel of the Dharma, so to speak. And all 8 factors support each other simultaneously. Of course, I was the one that wrote the book, and I am the one that had this mnemonic device that helped me learn this to memorize it when I was actually a Dhamma teacher for children. I came up with this Visa Let 'em See, which the whole concept behind that was on your journey through samsara, you need a passport. And in that passport, you have a visa, let 'em see. And so the Noble Eightfold Path is broken down into 3 parts. And so in the first part, we have wisdom, prajna. And so the wisdom part of it, the first 2 spokes, we might call it, are right view and right intention. In the second part, we have sila, or ethics. So we have prajna and sila, and in a moment we'll get to the samadhi, or the meditation, the concentration part. But in the ethics, the sila part, we have right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And this is the Buddha teaching us, if we live these ways and practice these practicings, we can cease suffering. And as I said, the last part is the meditation section of the Noble Eightfold Path. So again, you often hear this called prajna, sila, samadhi. And so in the samadhi, or the meditation part, we have right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so these 3 trainings, prajna, sila, samadhi, wisdom, ethics, meditation, are not sequential stages, but a living mandala. Each supports and deepens the others. We walk all 8 at once, however imperfect we actually are. And then we turn, all of these are included in the Heart Sutra. I meant to say that at the beginning. All of these teachings of the Buddha are included in the Heart Sutra that we chant every week. And this section here, the 6 senses, the 6 consciousnesses, and the 6 dusts, are an integral part of the Heart Sutra that we chant. And so the Buddha taught us that awakening is not found in withdrawal from the world, but in contact with it. How we engage the world and nature in its very presence. And so the 6 senses, which you'll know from the Heart Sutra, are the eye, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. And they're the gates. These are the senses in which we experience all stimuli, all type of experience arrives to us through these senses. And then we have the sense objects, which we call the dusts. And we call the dust this because they settle on the mirror of our awareness, but also because they are the impermanent part. This dust can be blown away and it's gone. So that is what we actually experience through our 6 sense objects. And through the eyes, we experience form. Through the ears, sound. Through the nose, smell, etc. So we chant these also in the Heart Sutra. And then we get to the sense consciousness. What is the consciousness? The consciousness is when we, with our eyes, we see a form. Then in our consciousness, we describe it, we define it. That's where we become aware. Sitting in front of me is a computer monitor. I see it, I label it in my mind, and then I give a name to it. So as we see these 6 senses and then the 6 dusts and the 6 consciousnesses, we see that we don't have to add a me, a self to this. Because when we wipe it clean of the dust, what remains is just awareness of every single moment to moment experience. And so the next time you're sitting, and we'll do that here in just a few minutes when we sit for another 15 minutes. If you notice a sound, can you hear it without naming it and without deciding whether you like it or not? That gap before you decide if you like it or not, that is freedom. And then we have the 5 skandhas, also chanted in the Heart Sutra. And it's all about self. And the Buddha's teaching that what is not you, what is not this self that we tend to wrap our ego into. And these 5 aggregates that we chant in the Heart Sutra is what most people think as themselves. And the Buddha was teaching it. They're 5 empty aggregates, and they arise and dissolve moment to moment. The first one is form, the body, impermanent, vulnerable, subject to aging and decay. The next one is feeling. Remember, as we're chanting these, no form, no feelings, feeling. And I describe it here as feeling tone, because it's not a feeling like a pinprick. It's a description that we ourselves give it, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. That's the trigger point where craving or aversion is born. And then we have the perception. This is when we label things. So we see a plant has a pretty little red thing at the top of it, has thorns on it, and we suddenly label it. That's a rose. That's a flower. Then we have our mental formation. This is that vast warehouse of habits, intentions, and karma. Volition lives here. The choices that shape future becoming. And finally, we have consciousness. It's not a fixed witness, but a flowing awareness arising, dependent entirely on those other things that happen, the 4 other things that happen before it. And it's never the same twice. Never. You go to the beach and you see the waves coming in. No wave is exactly like the first wave. Everyone is different. Together, these aggregates give us this idea that is me. But looking closely, can you pick which one of those is really you? The Buddha says you can't. And when you learn to let go, that's liberation. And when the self is seen as a process rather than a fixed identity, then that great awakening appears. And then, perhaps considered one of the Buddha's more difficult teachings, but it's really not, because this is a teaching on emptiness, the 12-link chain of dependent origination. When this is, that is. When this ceases, that ceases. That is the 12-link chain wrapped into one sentence, or 2 sentences, forgive me. When this is, that is. When this ceases, that ceases. So the 12-link chain, these 12 links form a chain that turns the wheel of suffering. And you can see how suffering arises from these. First, we have the setup. And again, we just kind of talked about these a little bit. The setup is the ignorance, formations, consciousness, and name and form, that nama rupa. And then we interface with those 4 things. Our interface is exactly that. Our 6 sense bases, our 6 sense contacts and feeling tone. Excuse me. And then we have our reaction. Our reaction is craving, clinging, becoming. And then we are born and we die. So the 12-link chain can be broken up into 3 parts: the setup, the interface, the reaction, and the result. This is not some abstract philosophy that the Buddha was trying to teach. He was trying to teach real, tangible, practical understanding. And so you can watch it unfold. You can watch it unfold when your phone buzzes. There's your first contact. And a flicker of tension arises in your mind. Should I check my phone? Should I see if that's a message from so-and-so? And then we reach for it. I'm distracted. I can't finish what I'm doing. I got to grab my phone. So you grab your phone. And then you look and you realize, I grabbed my phone. Now I'm reading it. Oh, it was from my boss. Now I got to go, whatever. All of these things it's a pattern of reaction, stress. What do we do about the stress? How do we react? What do we do? Rather than stopping and breathing and taking a moment of pause, we react impulsively sometimes. The phone buzzed. I got to look. The breaking point for this 12-link chain is between the feeling tone and the craving. And that gap lives freedom. Feeling arises, but you do not have to reach. What arises dependently is empty of inherent existence. And that, whatever is empty, is totally releasable. So in practice, notice one moment today where feeling tone arises and you pause before reacting. That pause is the entire path. Okay, so these 6 chapters form a single arc. These teachings of the Buddha, these basic teachings of the Buddha. First, his life, which is our own, and then his teachings. It offers a mirror that we live in a palace of distraction. We encounter suffering and we have to choose whether to look or turn away. The Four Noble Truths give us the diagnosis and the cure, and the Noble Eightfold Path provides the integrated mandala of wisdom, ethics, and meditation, when woven together, allow us to cease our suffering. And then we see the 6 senses, their dust, and we learn the anatomy of experience, how awareness meets the world at every gate. And we look at these 5 skandhas, again, that we chant about in the Heart Sutra, and we know what we call a self is really just a process. And then finally, the arc is clear. From map to diagnosis, to path, to perception, to self, to causation. Each teaching illuminates the others. Together they form not a philosophy, but a practice to live and wake up to. So in returning to our practice, the Dharma is not a distant summit to be conquered. It lives in the sound of rain on the roof, in the breath rising and falling, in the moment between feeling and response, where you choose awareness over habit. And finally, awakening is not far away. It is discovered by looking directly at experience, softening the grip of our clinging, our grasping, and trusting the practice, one ordinary moment at a time. The Dharma is already here, waiting for you to notice.